Glad to have you guys back for another Writers Showcase. We got a couple of guests in the back room. I'm excited. Anyway, let's first bring in Mr. Aspiring Writer.
How can its multiple stories be unlocked in 140 minutes? How's the movie aged well in the nearly 40 years since it came out? And will Borman include some really awkward sex thing? Not very, sort of, and yes.
Ah, Borman. I've been hearing quite a bit about him.
Yeah. To those of you, to the Excalibur fans in the audience, I'm seriously considering reviewing that movie because I've rewatched Nash Bozard's review of Excalibur, and the clips they show just make the movie look like crap. The movie Excalibur is really bad. There's a lot of problems with it, mostly in terms of the direction. The writing is eh. The main stuff is like the action is legitimately awful. But we have another guest in the back room, so we should not keep him waiting. So...
Greetings. That intro clip was long as the blazes.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, does anybody have any time constraints that I should be aware of?
It's the usual. Around 4 something, I'll be going off to do lunch.
All right.
Probably about 4:15.
Alrighty.
Which is 2:15 your time. I should point ahead.
All right, then you go first.
Let's see. Where are we? We're back in the serious thing. We're doing some politics here. Basically, the governor wanted to marry Margaret so he could get her castle, and maybe he's sort of in love with her, or maybe he's not so in love with her. Who knows? So he's trying to get the prince and the high priest on his side, so they can join him so they can join him and get the emperor to send an army, so that he can just march in and say, "Hey, I'm here. I'm gonna." The drag being that she's already married someone else in the meantime. So let's see if this makes any sense or not. She's mine. Their treaty is not to the point. After a month's journey, Governor Bruno had arrived at court to a less than enthusiastic welcome and was playing a game of Amnushu, a complex chess-like game for 3 players. The name means faint, that's Feint, with the Yaji Malalaama and the Prince Mpu'u in the latter's study. The study was not too dissimilar to Count Garawada's, but was much larger and more ornate, with far more gold and jewels, and contained some 5,000 books, whereof glorious Mpu'u had perhaps read 100th, which was still 50 times as many as Exalted had ever read. The prince was getting tired of Bruno and had insisted on the game because the meeting would have been unbearable otherwise. "Then marry her," said Mpu'u, waving contemptuously at his left shoulder. "Oh wait, she's already married, or getting married anyway. If you want her, go to the province of Darzaz and marry her. If you can get to her before some half-barbarian of the far west does. We have more interesting things to think about, like paint drying." "If she's married, that will be difficult," said Malalaama gravely. A woman may not have more than one husband, as is stated in... Never mind, said Mpu'u. We know already. And your warrior piece just stepped on fire. The Castellan refuses to accept my authority, insisted Bruno. Really, the court was even worse than the Calamans. They made everything a screaming hassle. Always had to overcomplicate everything. Exalted's credibility will be lost if some wretched Castellan can flout his exalted authority like this. Do you, Glorious, not see that? I see that you have lost all your warriors, said the prince. What he wouldn't give for some waka'a. That's a drug. These provincials and their attitudes. And you should have been prepared for this. Looked over the treaty. Maybe there's something in it you could have used. Come with a decent-sized army in the first place. You knew they were prepared for you. Why are all you nobles so stupid? No wonder the peasantry are restive. Mpu'u placed his second Yaji piece next to his first. We must all be friends, said the Yaji, the high priest. Thus spake Karat. Why Nasha? Oh God. Ingminara Naharajmu, which means comity and harmony are praiseworthy. He deliberately put his second most important piece in as exposed a place as possible, hoping that Mpu'u would seize it. The prince rolled his eyes. Bruno, in the meantime, looked even sulkier than he had before. I shall need an army, he said. Glorious, blessed. He stared blankly at the board, nodded in token of indifference, and moved a random piece in a random direction. Who cared about this stupid game anyway? Your court etiquette is almost as bad as your playing, said Mpu'u. Are you making demands of the Exalted Box or petitioning it? He sighed loudly and casually took 3 of Bruno's pieces with his dragon. He pointedly ignored Malala Ama's exposed piece. You'll have to try harder than that, blessed. Petitioning. I beg Exalted. Please give lowly slave an army, said Bruno, almost snappily. Let's see. We will discuss this with Exalted Box and see what it says, said Mpu'u. It would help if you had something to offer. It's your turn, blessed. The Yaji put another piece in an exposed position. Even his playing is panegyric, growls Mpu'u to himself. We've already promised increased tribute, said Bruno. I believe that when you throw yourself upon exalted mercy, something more is required. Mpu'u sighed. It's your turn, by the way. You people might consider making some effort to play the game properly. Bruno grumbled under his breath and moved his dragon. He thought it was a dragon anyway, somewhere or other. The king threw up his arms helplessly and seized Bruno's last important piece. If the provincial wanted to be trounced, who was Mpu'u to deny him? It's praiseworthy to give to the Temple of the Way, put in Malala Ama. This was as close as he could get to actually demanding a bribe, so he did it in as unctuous a manner as possible, which was pretty unctuous. Do Glorious and Blessed have any idea how expensive the capital is? Retorted Bruno. Yes, given that we live here, said Mpu'u. By the way, you lost. Blessed, you lose in 1 turn if you don't watch your remaining warrior. Couldn't these people at least try, he wondered. We don't make much money in the provinces, said Bruno, absently fiddling with his 13th golden ring. He had a collection of 21 and had been hoping to augment it. He was, if anything, rather glad to be out of the game. "Then extort more bribes," said the prince, waving his left hand scornfully in Bruno's general direction. Bruno looked outraged. "Good. Exact more tribute. I, Glorious, don't care. Blessed cares even less. And Exalted cares less than anyone. If you want us to help you, you can jolly well pay for it." "What Great One requests is most irregular," added Viaggi. "Annul a marriage and award the lady to you based on your asking for her first. It's not according to any canons I know of. It will require much research to determine whether the law allows for such an exception." He distractedly put his warrior. Where are they? Sorry. He distractedly put his warrior on a black circle, which was against the rules. Or maybe it wasn't so distractedly. "Very well," said Bruno. My glorious and blessed masters have graced me abundantly, and exalted mercy shines upon the earth like a solitary sun." He did his best, but this last sentence came out sounding more like, "You make me sick." "Good," said the prince. "You may go. Great One may go. Whatever. Blessed, you lose. I win. What a surprise. Glorious intellect casts my feeble mind into the shadows with your skill," fawned Malala Ama, lowering his head in as servile a manner as possible. No, in as servile a manner as was consonant with his princely dignity. "Nonsense," said Mpu'u. I'm sorry. Nonsense, said Mpu'u. "I know you'll let me win. Your position started out vastly better, and you're not that poor a player. This is the boring thing about being Imperial. One of the boring things. No one dares win a game against me except Exalted, and he doesn't know the first thing about playing. Great One Bruno, why are you still here? Go already." He waved a hand towards the exit, and Bruno crawled out of the study backwards, still half sputtering. "I suppose we'll have to ask Exalted about it to get it over with," Mpu'u sighed. "It's unimportant enough that he probably can't mess it up too badly." "More than he already has." "Exalted wisdom," began Malala Ama, but the prince motioned him to be silent. "Never mind," he said. "Save the adulation for Exalted ear." So they headed towards Exalted Chamber, which was a good ways away and on a higher story. But Mpu'u had a secret stairway behind one of the less frequently used bookcases, so that he could consult with Exalted if needed. Ekwekwe hated this, and was always talking about getting the staircase sealed up, but never remembered. To be fair, Mpu'u hated it too. The farther away one was from Exalted Chamber, the better. But duty called. Let's see how long this next bit is. Okay, I think the next bit is just... Okay, I'll do the next bit too. It's fairly short. "Why do you keep annoying and Exalted me?" said Ekwekwe. "Can't you see that I'm busy with the Saranjis?" Actually, he was mainly busy with a pair of cross-dressing monkeys, but the less said about that, the better. Mpu'u and Malala Ama had been admitted into Exalted bedchamber immediately by the guards. Guarding the imperial bedchamber was a task sought out only by the most deviant guards, and was viewed as a horrible punishment by the rest. And it intimated to Ekwekwe, the emperor, that they wished to consult with him. Exalted reluctantly put the monkeys aside and stared at the pornography on the walls instead. "Heavy is the burden of the crown," intoned Malala Ama, fiddling with his sacred necklace, and making the gesture of the nine, which seemed singularly out of place in this room. "So it is written in the book of Runja." Lunnu agaraj nava. Na 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 na, replied the emperor. The Warmad's boring. Malala Amma secretly agreed, but succeeded in looking shocked anyway, from long practice. Mpu'u found himself wishing he had been born blind and deaf. He hated this place. Regrettably, when one is ruler, one does have to spend some time actually, well, ruling. It's a bother, I know. Rubbish, said Exalted. Ruling means doing what I like. Exalted I. And where are Margaret and Barama? By the time they get here, I'll be too old. You're already too old. Mpu'u knew better than to say that out loud, though. He sighed and rolled his eyes instead. It is decent to allow time for mourning, said Malala Amma. The Waramod, indeed. Na 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 na, commented Mpu'u sotto voce. Why didn't I bring some waka'a? Ekwekwe wheezed, coughed, and flatulated. More what? He snorted. Traitors! The demands of nature must be met, said the Yaji. The more revolting Ekwekwe got, the more grave and dignified Malala Amma became by reaction. Nothing in his expression betrayed the fact that he was in a pornography-studded room in the presence of a doddering abyss obscenity with all the majesty of mildew. In Death and Life, it says, Dry up! Exalted silence, said the emperor. Malala Amma did, albeit with a pained expression. Can we please get to the point, pleaded Mpu'u, waving his arms helplessly, and get it over with? Buruna reports that the Castellan of the castle of Tserthatan refuses allegiance to him. That's hardly surprising. We should have dug up a relative of the late count and appointed him, so long as he's a puppet, of course. Relying on some random, undependable official to marry an heir who isn't even there and can't be reached, not easily anyway, and just hoping she'll wed him when we're not in a position to put direct pressure on her. Well, there are doubtless stupider plans, but not many. Perhaps Baruno has the title by virtue of being Margaret's imperially recognized husband, suggested Malala Amma. Who better than Exalted to determine the truth? Almost anyone, thought the prince. Without an actual marriage, he said aloud. Though I suppose you could issue a statement that you don't recognize her marriage to Count Edrion for whatever reason. Dig around, or perhaps the temple archivist could be persuaded to find a document proving she married Baruno. The temple archivist had been a forger before being pardoned and hired by Emperor Ekwekwe III, and was considered an expert in the field. Meanwhile, Exalted got distracted by one of the more disgusting bas-reliefs in the room and took several minutes to get to the point. Exalted? Inquired the priest. Mpu'u sighed loudly. Just do it and leave, said Ekwekwe. You do want to ensure that the province of Ihalumu remain in the empire, Exalted, pointed out the prince. It would weaken our power, not to mention our wealth, to lose it, especially since the province of Darzaz would leave the empire as well. Not to mention that Baruno would be less likely to object to Margaret joining the harem if Exalted is still obsessing over that. He checked himself from making a disdainful gesture. Doing so in Exalted presence automatically incurred Exalted displeasure. First class. That was bad. Very well, very well arranged for the forces, said Exalted. Just make sure someone we trust is in charge. Now go. They went, crawling up backwards according to etiquette, and headed straightway for the Sarangis. Exalted, in the meantime, went back to the monkeys. Exalted is as tired of us as we are of him, muttered the prince, and of each other. Malala pretended not to have heard. And that is enough of that.
I think you write villain political conversations very well.
Thank you.
I have a very good sense of these characters. You do a good job of kind of illustrating them. They're a little bit, I guess, kind of cipher/caricatures, but they work very well for who they are.
Yeah, they're kind of caricatures, yeah.
So
that's good.
Yeah,
it's fun writing the villains.
Yeah.
So, is it clear enough?
Yeah, I thought it was clear. Or what they're trying to do. They're trying to get the castle away from Margaret and get her into the harem, I think.
Yeah, well, the governor wants to marry her, and Exalted wants her in the harem, but they both want. So they both have an interest in Bruno getting the castle. And there's not necessarily a contradiction in principle between Bruno, the governor, marrying her, and you're going to the harem. That's not necessarily mutually contradictory. I mean, it is according to strict law, but hey.
What can you do?
Yeah. You can probably make up some reason why it's okay, and because Exalted enforces it, it'll end up being people will have to go along with it. So that's the plan.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, anything else, or are we going to move on to expiring?
Yeah. I think expiring goes like next makes the most sense.
All right. All right, 28. I'm so fucking tired.
Yeah. Tired too, kind of.
So, recap. Last chapter, Vampira had a conversation with Mark in which Mark refused to answer several questions about why one of the two targets she was sent to capture was a child, why he's being their team taken into Mark's freighter, and as well as just several things about the situation that just did not make sense, to her at the very least. Being suspicious, she decided to sneak on the Mark's freighter, and has managed to get inside undiscovered. 2 days passed with her jammed against a ceiling, her legs and arms tucked in a way that was not comfortable or dignified, with her side taking up more space than her. The hand landed throughout her time stuck up there, which concerned her. With the hyper rings, it never took more than a standard day to reach any destination, meaning they were either rendezvousing with someone or didn't yet have a destination. Whichever it was, Vampire hoped he stopped somewhere soon. Being stuck in this way was getting painful. She'd been giving herself occasional bursts of healing to stay alert, which helped relieve the soreness from her muscles, but it was not even hours before the stiffness returned. At least she didn't have to worry about people getting suspicious of her absence. That ship had taken off before the first day even ended. She could already see how it would have played out. Her freighter landing, ramp lowering to let Zali outside, waiting. Cassidy, who would initially wait for her, would go to check what was taking so long. Zali would give Cassidy her apology, and the crew would be taken in as the search for her began. Oh, Cass. Vamper hoped she wasn't worried about her. She wished she could have told Cassidy more, but telling Zali anything about what she was doing would have been too risky. Her entire crew would be subjugated to questioning from DLE agents who would pry into their memories for anything about her whereabouts. She only hoped her crew weren't treated too harshly. Despite her cover being blown, she hadn't heard of any search for her within the ship, so they didn't suspect her having smuggled herself inside. Even the DLE on board hadn't noticed her. She'd been paying careful attention on sensing anyone touching her mind, and she hadn't felt anything. The DLE must be spending most of his energies on the two targets. She didn't know any other reason he would have been brought on, and hasn't been able to notice any extra mind in the ship. Or perhaps he didn't see anything amiss. She had boarded well before they took off. He might have accidentally included her among the number of minds that should be there. He didn't look further into it. Whatever the reason, she was lucky the DLE didn't do a more careful search of the minds of the ship. DLE were known to be liberal with their usage of telepathy, given the authority to use their abilities to their discretion. The rest of Mark's security were hardly any trouble. A pair of guards would show up periodically to sweep the cargo bay before leaving. None of them bothered to look up at her stack of crates, not even considering someone hiding in that narrow place. Still, they prevented her from going further into the ship. If even one saw her, they would alert Mark, and that would be it. As her third day on board was ending, she kept track of the days by counting the cargo bay sweeps. Did one every 5 standard hours. An explosion shook the ship, sending all of the other crates shaking and knocking the air out of her lungs. A momentary rush of air and a loud clamp that appeared all around the ship told her a hull breach had been closed by a secondary hull. The echoing of footsteps became louder and hastier before slowing down. Not an attack, then. An accident? Or perhaps sabotage? Both seemed unlikely, yet those seemed like the only two possibilities. A team of maintenance workers entered the cargo bay, waiting at the entrance, talking amongst themselves in angry tones. "I'm telling you, this is going to be put on us," a Green Mackey was grumbling. "Why would it be put on us?" another Mackey demanded. "Is that our job to know what's in the hull of the engine room? We're just supposed to keep everything working." "And are things working?" a human demanded. "When was it even put there? It was right where the Etian generator was. We're just lucky it blew somewhere near where we can land. Hate doing repairs in space." They continued arguing, but Vamper stopped listening. So it was sabotage. An explosive attached to the hull. Fortuitous for her, but explosion likely meant more trouble to come. If they were right, and it exploded close enough to a planet to get there without an Etian field, that wasn't happenstance. Someone wanted to ground Mark's freighter, which meant whatever she intended to do, she'd better do it fast. The ramp eventually started to lower, letting the maintenance team out, but Vamper stayed where she was. She needed to wait until Mark left the ship. He's the one person she can't risk running into. Watching the comings and goings of maintenance and security officers leaving and entering the ship, Vamper finally saw Mark storm out, his heavy cloak looking almost undisturbed by his passing as it hung down. Letting out a sigh, Vamper eased herself out of the crushing space, doing her best not to make a sound. Hanging off the edge, she dropped down silently, her legs screaming as she rose from a crouch, forcing herself to stifle a gasp. Giving herself a touch of healing, Vamper stifled another gasp as the euphoric feeling of days' worth of stiffness and pain vanished and was replaced with renewed strength, like awareness brought back after being doused with icy water when in a fever. Collecting her sight, she went deeper into the ship, not bothering to hide as she made her way to the brig. Those she passed gave her the customary wide eyes that she was used to, touched with surprise at her being there. But none stopped to question her. Who were they to question why an angel was here? She was Mark's superior and had every right here. Of course, the charade would only last until someone brought her up to Mark, but with him away, she should have a little time before then. The brig was at the far corner of the ship, away from the engine room in commotion, and she was stopped at the entrance by the 2 guards on duty there, both holding white rifles. "What's your purpose here?" one of the guards asked. Achilles, his eyes looking her up and down with a scowl, trying to search her with his infrared vision, likely one of the reasons he was chosen for the position, but frustrated that he couldn't read her. Skilled fillies could read and interpret changes in body heat, and she'd been told that hers was hard to read. Likely another advantage of her filly's blood, like her eyes. Fillies couldn't read each other's body heat, an adaptation of their skin. Glowering down at the guard, she asked, "What concern is it of yours? Let me through." The other guard, a Maquis with orange skin and white hair, bowed his head for saying, "We've been ordered not to let anyone inside without express permission from Mark, ma'am." "And you think this order includes me, his superior?" "Open the door." The 2 guards looked at each other, and Vampire stepped closer, eyes flaring. The Maquis guard rushed to let her inside, the door closing as he sighed in relief. Vampire let out a silent sigh of her own. Mark Hen left orders specifying her. She'd been worried after their conversation, or being told of her disappearance he would have, but he seemed he truly didn't suspect she was on board. The freighter's brig wasn't very large, with only enough room for 4 cells, all 18 shielded. She went to the target cell, the only one that showed to be occupied. As the thick metal doors to the cell hissed open, the first thing Vampire noticed was how dark it was in there. There wasn't even a glimmer of light inside. Anger rose as Vampire let out a growl. This was treatment reserved for dangerous fugitives, not a child and their parent. Brightening up a cell, she went inside and found the targets held together on the ground, dry and reddened eyes widening when they saw her despite the sun brightness. The young girl whimpered, hugging her father tighter. "I see you both remember me," Vampire said, keeping her voice neutral. "I was hoping you could—" She cut off when she noticed the Maquis girl's arm was bandaged. She hadn't been injured before boarding. Stepping closer, she reached out to remove the bandage, but the little girl shied away from her. Vampire retracted her hand, waiting until the girl calmed down. Turning to her father, she asked, "What's the bandage there for?" The father shook his head tiredly. "Can you remove it? It's not too serious, is it?" He gave her an odd look, but shook his head again, pulling down the bandage. As he did, Vampire inhaled sharply, eyes blazing. From the shoulder to the elbow, the Maquis girl had 3 squares of the outer skin removed, revealing the pink skin underneath. The precision and exactness of the cuts made it feel even more revolting. Her fist trembling, Vampire forced herself to temper her fury. The Dahlia might sense the raw emotion emanating from her. Now, more than ever, she could not afford to be discovered. "Who did this to her?" Vampire asked hoarsely. Maquis father didn't answer, eyes downcast, defeated. "Who?" "Why do you ask? You know who did it. Please, you know everything. Stop toying with us." Momentarily taken aback by the outburst, Vampire softened her expression and continued in a more soothing tone. "I'm not toying with you. Please, tell me who did this. Do you think I'd ask if I did know?" A suspicious look told her that, yes, he did think she might. However, he sighed and answered, "It was this scientist woman. A human. I didn't see much of her. The Delia thought it best to keep us in the dark." Fewer distractions, Vampire thought idly, hating how she understood the logic. If kept in darkness, they wouldn't distract themselves with their surroundings when the Delia entered their minds. What were they wanting? What was the Delia asking? The Maquis shook his head again. "You said earlier that they already knew everything. What harm would it be to tell me?" The Maquis looked up, holding her gaze with a strength that contradicted his stooped posture and weak voice. "Why do you want to know? We're here because of you." "That's precisely why I want to know." He looked at her skeptically, but the answer must have seemed sincere to him, for he started explaining. He wanted to know whether or not her mother was a host. Her mother and I, we weren't close. I didn't even know about Nala until she came to my doorstep and handed her off to me and left. Turns out she didn't give birth in a hospital. They had no record of it or Nala, and so questioned me. I told them I didn't know if she was a host, and Adelia said that was fine if I could provide who she is. I didn't know why they wanted her, so I refused. And the Mickey swallowed. And Adelia tried to pry into my mind. Tried. You're a mind host. The McKee shook his head weakly. No, I'm no host. Excuse me. Taking a shaky breath, he nodded to his daughter and said, She is the host. A double host. A full mind host and at least a part matter host, if what they say is to be believed. When Adelia tried to... She protected me. His voice cracked, sounding ashamed. She kept him from getting in my mind. I could feel him trying to break through, to overpower her, but eventually he gave up, storming off. Gripping his daughter tighter, he gave her a small smile. All the while I could see her straining, trying to keep her out. Vamper looked over at the girl, regarding her. Based on what the Maquis told her, the little girl has spent all her mind wall, her telepathic protection, on her father rather than splitting it between the two of them. Whether intentionally or from ignorance of her abilities, she had made it so her father had enough protection that Adelia couldn't eventually break through it, like if she had split it. It also appeared that Adelia tried breaking the mind wall regardless, hoping his emotions would strengthen him enough to break through a full mind wall. A small chance, but Adelia was high-ranked enough that he might have had the skill to pull it off if the little girl hadn't resisted. Considering the situation, Vamper had no doubt whose emotions would have been stronger. What happened next? She prodded. Then, the scientist came with Adelia in tow. The Maquis shuddered and the little girl touched her flayed arm. She had Adelia hold us down with his mind, up against a wall, held by nothing as she took. His lips curled back, revealing his pointed teeth in a pained snarl, his eyes glazed over in remembrance. What did she take? Vamper asked reluctantly, regretting she had to force him to recall this to her. He gave her a wild look, still snarling. She started small, swabbing her mouth for saliva, blood samples. Then she injected something into her arm, and took out some sort of knife and cut into her, removing her skin. She couldn't feel it, but Nala could see every moment. She never bled, not even a drop, and the scientist wrapped a bandage with a bored expression, as if she wasn't cutting into a frightened little girl. After she was finished, she then turned Nala around and injected something in one of her tentacles and cut off a piece. Turning Nala around, the Maquis showed one of her tentacles, the tip removed and the cut black, cauterized. The Maquis father was trying his best not to look at it, staring at the floor. Maquis tentacles were very sensitive and private, and some took great pride in them. Staring at the black scar, Vampa stayed silent, unable to make herself ask them further questions. What could be the purpose of this? What could possibly justify it? Mark couldn't be aware of this, the sources couldn't be aware of this. There had to be an explanation. The Maquis father continued without her asking. They left then, and the next day, Adelia came back. And this time, he didn't just attack me. When Nala tried protecting me, he targeted her instead. Nala grimaced, and the Maquis stroked her tentacles gently, comforting her. She would scream, and the protection would leave me for her, and Adelia would change his onslaught back on me until she protected me again, where he would again target her. Eventually, she wasn't even able to lift her head, boating on the floor as he pried into me and found the memories he wanted. Her name, her face, all of it. They found her, Vamper finished. That's why they haven't landed anywhere. They were trying to find out where the woman is before heading to their destination. He nodded. It didn't take long. Adelia came back to tell me she was dead. Had been for over a year. Was she a host? The Maquis shook his head. No, she wasn't, they were certain, which meant they could continue on their way. Suddenly he bit out a curse at himself. I should have listened when they came to me. Shouldn't have been so stubborn. Vamper frowned. Listen to who? The revolutionaries, Temeki said, using the name the anarchists used for themselves. They found out about her sometime before the ascending territory. Or perhaps simply reacted faster. The bout happened after that medical... What did they tell you? What didn't you listen to, she demanded, intent. The anarchists had been involved with her and Mark, and now she found out he had an interest in these too. What is going on here? Everything, the McKeef Savhader said mournfully. They told me about what you do to hosts, about why Nella was lucky to be alive, what they would do to her, where they would take her. They would take her to the war front with the Evoluto, to be trained as soldiers. Then McKee narrowed his eyes. What? That's what you think happens? And you're okay with that? With children being taken away and trained for war? It is necessary for maintaining the peace of the territories, Vamper said immediately, almost instinctually, before an immediate feeling of shame. She'd always thought it okay before. It was how she was brought up, after all. But after she and Cassidy, and having to make that decision herself, and deciding against it, she couldn't pretend she agreed with it. But I understand why you wouldn't want that for Nala. Sneering, he said, at this point I'd take it. The revolutionaries had given me a way out. Go with them, have Nala join them when older, and be saved from what's going to happen. Before she could ask how that was any better than what the Ascending Territory were doing, Vamper tensed and stood as she heard a hiss. The door to the brig was opening. She'd been discovered. End of chapter. Thoughts, concerns, comments?
I think the character work is pretty good in this. I think that I felt like I had a pretty good sense of the place and location. In terms of the just get the sense of like this like dank, dirty basement type place, and this family that's been made into not terribly good environs. And I get the sense that Ampra is slowly becoming disillusioned with all this.
That is where I am going with for now, yes.
Alrighty.
Yeah, who are the...
You go?
Sorry, who are the Delia again?
Delia are like telepathic police. I haven't used their name too much, but they're basically telepathic police. They're meant to basically handle anything with mind hosts, because there'll be a mention in next chapter. When you have people who can mind control other people, or just read other people's minds, you kind of need somehow to police that, and it's really hard to if you don't have that ability.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so the DLE are meant to be the solution to that, and they're given jurisdiction to basically do whatever they want. Within certain reason. They can be reported, but yeah.
So basically, they took this girl and like skinned her alive or something?
They took parts of her skin, yeah.
Oh, that must have been lovely.
Indeed, it's a bit... Considering I have cannibalism, this still kind of feels dark.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't remember the cannibalism, luckily.
Don't worry, that was just like the first chapter, a slight reference.
Oh yeah, that was back when it was Tribble, right? Not Tribble.
Triple. You're right.
Triple. Okay. I was saying Tribble like the Star Trek animal. Triple.
But yes, what'd you think of their dialogue?
Thought it was fine.
Because it is mostly it is a very dialogue-heavy chapter.
It was fine.
I can't really talk there. I tend to do lots of dialogue too.
All right.
Eyes looking down in a scowl. Is that? Am I remembering that bit properly?
Let me see. Eyes looking. I said eyes looking her up and down with a scowl, yeah. It's when the police guard is basically trying to read her a bit and is finding that he can't, despite the fact she looks pretty much human.
Oh, okay. It's no big of a maybe leave out eyes and just see the guard was looking her up and down with a scowl. Maybe that's a little better. No big O though.
That's good to note. So all seem natural character-wise with how they both bounced off each other, considering basically the relationship is they're screwed because of her, they hate her, they think she's part of this, and they're very suspicious. She, meanwhile, is desperately wanting answers, and they're the only ones who will be willing to give it. And is also feeling more and more guilty as it goes on, and she realizes, I got these into a situation I have no knowledge about.
So she wasn't expecting these repercussions. So she captured these people or something?
Yeah, in the last chapter, she was sent to an outpost. She was told to capture some targets. She knew the father was one when they found her. She didn't realize one of them was a child until later. And she is pretty much the one responsible for taking out the entire base. I'd say taking out, they're not dead. That'll be a point, they're not dead.
Neutralizing the base.
Yeah, neutralizing the base. Capturing
Not dead yet.
What?
I'm not dead.
Not dead yet, I said.
Not dead yet.
I'm not dead.
So everything with the chapter seems fine?
Yeah, seems fine.
Yay! You're gonna have another dialogue-heavy chapter next time. Because I honestly had to split the dialogue between her and the Maquis father, who I will not give a name until the next chapter I'm doing. Very purposefully. That wasn't too annoying, was it, having him constantly just referred to as the Maquis father?
No, seems fine.
Because I
doesn't have a name. Why would he?
Yeah, because I don't know how or why. Like, I'm trying to think. How would Vampire ask him his name? It feels awkward for her to shove that in when she doesn't really care about the name. And so I'm like, she just won't know his name until later. Which will hopefully feel somewhat meaningful.
Wouldn't it be right if she were maybe he's her long lost brother or something?
He would have to be 7 centuries old, at least.
That would be something.
Plus, there are other brothers on the ship. If they're both brothers, then boy.
Yeah, if you get too many brothers, it gets boring.
They all become very much the same at one point.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Alright, so I am done for now.
Oh god, no, please don't, White Lord.
The jokes write themselves, as you have so loquaciously pointed out just now.
Not exactly loquaciously, but yes.
Okay, eloquently pointed out then.
Yes.
Don't worry. I'm only done in the literal sense of the word. I suppose. Alrighty. Well. This is chapter 20. Right now, we have a bunch of characters that are about to converge. The High Priestess is going to investigate more to see if he is actually who he says. The Elder Ones that are arrayed against them are trying to figure out what exactly is going to happen, what their plan is. And Mordred is trying to go off and find her so that they can have a just see what's up and try and persuade her not to um, send an army against them. That's the plan. All right. Alexandria sat down across from Jengaric, then pulled out the communications discs. We have discovered Mordred's whereabouts, she said. Whether by coincidence or design, he has returned to Lake Blackir. However, he's made a stir by reclaiming the title that the humans gave him a long time ago. Because of this, the High Priestess of Nordenbard has decided to investigate him personally. I want to set up a plan for delaying her from ever reaching him, at least until Lancelot and Caesarius can remove him. Why not just kill her and put someone biddable in the seat? Jengaric asked, tapping his fingers against the table. Or at least someone hostile to our enemy. I would prefer to avoid killing someone that high profile. Alexandria calmly interlaced her fingers on the table and created a glass of wine to drink. Despite not having to eat, it was pleasant to have the taste of fine food on her tongue. I actually agree with Jengaric. Lancelot's voice was as mild despite her words. Our strength is in creating chaos. Stability will only allow Mordred to gain momentum. The humans need to see us as stability in a storm of chaos, storm of unrest. As if we are to maintain our power. The abrupt death of an important figure will allow us to put one of our own into the position that has just become vacant. Alexandria considered this. There was an element of pragmatism to that. But it was somewhat risky. If it were pinned on them, then their efforts would be made extremely difficult. The cultists that Lancelot had gathered were not a large following as of now. What needed to happen was a slow buildup of loyalty, maybe a sign or two. But that would take time. Most of this would be based around directing troops that would likely follow them to getting rid of the ones that wouldn't. And unfortunately, Mordred wasn't going to come after them. And the best time to crush him would be while he was a small force. Leaning backward in her chair, Alexandria crossed her legs. I knew their route, she said finally, raising her hand and creating a map of the kingdom with a line running from the capital, Lake Blackir, as it was called, when Mordred ruled over it. Which of us is the closest and can organized? I can. The voice of Jormundir the Giant interrupted. Alexandria paused. Despite that thing's size, she'd often forgotten that they dredged him up. And thought. That thing's size, she hadn't thought they could go to the effort of dredging him up from the Emerald Plain and putting him into the body of a giant. The stupid beasts were the only thing that's capable of housing his spirit, mostly because anything smaller would explode. She'd thought that Lancelot would have avoided trying to revive him due to how much trouble it would take. But apparently she had done it. If Jormundir can kill everyone in the group, then we can blame it on wild giants and make sure that someone we can control is the new High Priestess. Or we can replace her with one of our own, Alexandria said finally. Get it done soon. Any other business to take care of? Jengeric asked. Me and Cesaris are getting closer to Black Lake. Lancelot reported. We're going to meet up with the army that is rounding up cultists in the area. Since our forest base has been cleared out, we need to make them think that everyone in Black Lake is a traitor and must die. An unfortunate, if necessary, action, Alexander mused. Yes, at least our friend has declared himself there, so convincing them to go into the city, it will not assault the city, it will not be difficult. Especially if we tied the death of the High Priestess to him, Jengeric shrugged. But I think it would be simpler to have her replaced by one of the last remaining elder ones that are waiting for release. I know a couple that would like to get back to Idrisil, Lancelot put in. We'll meet a Jormundir and make her into a vessel for one of our brethren. Very well then. Alexandria nodded firmly. Let it be done. So, what was it like before you left? Kara asked, spinning her knife through her fingers, absently cutting a chunk of fish free, eating it off the knife's edge. Honestly, I don't know if I have enough of a point of reference to really compare, Mordred admitted, slicing a chunk of cheese-covered meat up, ate with his finger and popping into his mouth. Honestly, the main thing that's different is this forest. A large number of cities were destroyed by the trees, and the island where you grew up used to be a large peninsula. Carr nodded and glanced around their campsite in the middle of a ring of stones, cutting bits of fish away while surveying the area for any danger. Fair enough. She spun the knife again. Just tell me what it was like. Given how long it's been, it's probably fairly different. Well, it's hard for me to really contextualize, since back then I was considered a demigod. Mark sliced another chunk and skewered it with his clawed fingernail. I interacted with people on a broad scale, and by and large they didn't want to offend me. The only times when I could get anything in terms of genuine reactions were when I was in disguise. In terms of landscapes, there used to be a lot more cities, but they've been torn down. I remember close to here, there was actually an old passage down into the deep depths of the earth where the giant elder one named Jormundir lived. He built an entire city deep down beneath the ground, but you can open the door from the inside or with tremendous strength. Wait. Kara raised her knife. Kara's knife paused. Paused. A piece of fish balanced precariously on the edge of her knife. A giant elder one? But there's wild beasts. Yeah? Some of us are even part animal. And based on what I've heard, most of the intelligent giants are now dead or vanished into the mountains to where humans can't get them. He shrugged and summoned Caliburn as he finished eating. Absently slid his claws down the blade, lightly enough that it didn't make any annoying sounds. Huh. Well, that's different. Kara flicked the last piece of fish into her mouth and dusted off her hands. So, all those stories about brave knights fighting giants to rescue fair maidens aren't so fanciful after all? Mordred nodded. My friend Gawain was called the Giant Slayer because of how many he put down. It didn't hurt that he was 7.5 feet tall and built like a bull. Mordred smiled at the memory of his friend walking into the main banquet hall, a maiden on each shoulder pulling a wagon of giant heads, green hair and beard wild and tangled with the verdant moss that seemed to grow from his armor. Then it soured when he remembered fighting Gawain during the war with Artorias. Bad memories? Kara asked, pointing at Mordred's face with her knife. You're not good at hiding your emotions with certain circumstances. Swaying, Mordred slid his fingers down on his sword. I had to fight Gawain during my war with Artorias, since that's the side he came down on. I had to slice his head off with my sword in order to kill him. He was uniquely resilient to all other forms of bodily destruction. Doesn't that sword of yours permanently kill Elden? Instantly kill Elden? Permanently and instantly kill Elden? Kara asked, nodding to Caliburn. I wasn't using this blade at the time, Mordred explained. The one I had was no stronger than any other Elder weapon. But after I battled Artorias, I took his sword. So you're a corpse robber, Kara smirked and sheathed her knife. Guilty as charged, Mordred shrugged, running his handle on the edge. During the battle, I managed to pull the sword from him and kill him with it. So how did you manage to keep it? Kara asked. Whenever the other ones killed died, they dropped their weapons. No one knows what makes the sword different, but whenever an Elder One is killed with it, their spirit is destroyed, absorbed into the weapon. Mordred shrugged. Artorias never told anyone how he amplified his sword's powers, but to answer your question, I bonded the sword to my soul and changed it so I could store it inside me while I used my other sword to fight. When I died, my real sword, the one I was born with, was dropped next to me. I couldn't break free via my shackles until recently, so it's only because they thought I destroyed it and I didn't attempt to fight them that they weren't able to take it. Huh. Alright, purse your lips. Well, I suppose that makes sense. Honestly, I've only had to use this weapon after escaping. Mordred let his mind drift to his old sword as he slid his finger down on Caliburn's edge, pressing to notice his movement for the first time and focused on his nails. This might seem random, but have you always had those claws? Yes, along with these. Mordred smiled and exposed his elongated canines and slightly pointed teeth. The arm is something of a new addition, along with these. He ran his in a hand down the scar-like bulges on his cheek that ran, and the flowed down his back. This I've had my whole life. He patted his back where the ridges were concealed under his clothes. The spinal ridges. Were concealed under his clothes. Really, I've just been a freak for my entire life. Indeed, Kara stood up, absently cracking her back, then walked over to Wrath. The big ugly destrier whickered as she patted him down and got him saddled, clearly eager to get back on the road after a night of rest. Breathing out, Mordred followed Kara's lead with Breeze, carefully washing away any lingering tiredness and pushed his muscles as he could. As he made sure to slip her some oats, the piebald bear neighed appreciatively and nuzzled his face. You're a good one, he remarked, stroking her neck. Sighing, he swung into the saddle and turned it toward the east. Based on Virus's instructions, Mordred created an illusionary map with a glowing dot to indicate the position. We should be moving east toward the city here. He pointed at another mark. It's a good place to supply on the way to meet up with our friend and the High Priestess. Hopefully she's our friend, Kara nodded Wrath forward. I'd like her to be. It would make things easier, but we might be in for a fight. Possibly, Mordred agreed. But either way, we should make the attempt. Even in the face of bad odds, you're strangely positive, Kara remarked, absently trying with the reins into shield out. Out Wrath's head. It's oddly encouraging. I do believe that even when faced with horrible odds, especially when you must fight anyway, it's best to simply charge headfirst at it. Roger flexed his fingers. No matter what, I'll do what needs to be done. Laviarna hated traveling in carriages. They were rickety, jouncy things. Not as bad as, say, a wagon, like the one her uncle had taken to market, but she preferred her own feet, or a boat. Not surprisingly, Maeve seemed quite settled in her carriage seat. Aristocrats have a strange sense of balance with this sort of thing, Laviarna thought as she took a firmer grip on the handles next to her. If you ask me, she said, trying to take her mind off of her situation, this man is a mad heretic who seems to be gaining a following. I very much doubt that he will be willing to talk to you beyond demanding your seat. I'd like to see for myself before I make a decision, Laviarna. Maeve placed her hands in her lap. As prescribed for the High Priestess, she wore a white dress with carefully designed strips making up the outer of her bodice, though now they were out of the capital, there were small golden pieces where normally skin would be showing. Laviarna pooped at the traditional outfit. It was only right and proper that a High Priestess should resemble all aspects of a goddess in beauty, grace, and piety, while also displaying said beauty so that the world could see the blessings of the divine. It states clearly in Scripture that he will come in power and glory in the city of his origin, Laviarna insisted. That city was Byzantium, now Nordenbar. Perhaps there's been a misinterpretation, Maeve shrugged. This man clearly isn't just a man. He has powers beyond that of a regular mage, and it seems that he has gifted powers similar to his own to others, just as he said he would. He has healed all who have come to him for succor, and has not called for anyone to give him political power. All he's done is declare himself and heal the infirm and the cripple so that they might be made whole again. Somewhat displeased at being balked, Laviarna protested. The texts are in an ancient language that few are able to accurately translate. They cut her off mildly. Some of the signs are clear, some are not. Most of the clear signs are more telling us about him and his personality than predicting the future. Laviarna grimaced. That wasn't heresy per se, just an unfortunately narrow and it's an unfortunately broad interpretation. If it wasn't meant to be taken as prophetic, then what is the point of their existence? To show what the herald was like and what kinds of people we should be, Maeve said mildly. He always said, I do nothing except what my mother has shown me, which is clearly metaphorical, Laviarna said, trying to keep her stickler nature from rearing its persnickety head. The goddess has no physical form with which to create children. Now we get interpretations. Maeve smiled gently and patted Laviarna's hand. If we're being objective about what's in the scriptures, there aren't any specifics about what he will do that are in the original text. It's very general and more indicative of his personality than as a prediction of the future. You may believe that as the High Priestess, but I will not. Not until it is proven to me. Laviarna's grip tightened as they hit what must have been a root. Besides, he's deformed. Yes, I saw the reports. Maeve reached into her satchel and pulled out the reports regarding the man's appearance out of the bag. The man claiming to be the herald has a number of physical abnormalities. First, his face has a number of strange scar lines on one side of his cheek. While the other has ridge-like growths running down his neck and meeting at the top of his spine. Second, his teeth resemble something akin to a wolf. His fingernails are more claws than anything human. The most noticeable abnormality is his arm. It's elongated and stretched out, exceptionally thin and sickly looking, though the rest of his body is oddly thin already. Sounds like some sort of deformed creature trying to deceive us, Lavierna said smugly. Or the Herald is trying to show us that we need to see him for who he is, and not what he appears, Maeve countered sweetly. Only out of the abundance of the heart may good deeds come forth, whereas a corrupt tree will always bear evil fruit. Quoting scripture at me, Lavierna grimaced as they were jounced. Is that driver trying to... She cut off as the horses screamed and the sides of the carriage cracked, act as something raised it into the air. What is going... Maeve cut off with a scream as she pulled back the curtain on the door to reveal the carriage had been picked up by a giant hand covered in steel. Run! She exclaimed, pushing open the opposite door and pushing Lavierna out. Get out of here! Almost without hesitation, Lavierna leaped from the carriage, falling 10 feet to the ground. Immediately, she clapped her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. It was not a giant like anything she'd seen roaming the edges of the kingdom, sometimes wandering near populated areas. Those were shaggy, bestial monstrosities with large tusks, long claws, usually ran around naked as animals. This creature was a 15-foot tall man covered in plate armor, a hood with a crown around it covering his head, casually holding the carriage like it was a toy. Choking back a scream, Lavierna scrambled away behind a stone as the giant held the carriage up to his eye line as if to examine his prize. Ponderously, the man closed his hand around the carriage, not enough to crush it, just securing it in his massive hand. Covering her mouth in horror, Lavierna took off running. And that's the end. Thoughts? Feedback?
Okay, so Mortar is being tried to see whether he is a fraud or a heretic, or whether he's actually a religious figure in their religion. One of them, like the high priestess, is inclined to say that yeah, maybe he is. Another one thinks it's heresy and is getting worked up because it doesn't go according precisely to their scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that?
Yep. As well as the Elder Ones have sent a giant Elder One to capture the High Priestess and either kill her or replace her.
Oh, okay. Are the people, I can't remember, are the people aware of this who are trying Mordred?
No.
Oh, okay, good.
Well, they are technically aware now because one has just been grabbed. They've already carried it out. Now the giant's carrying her away.
She's getting carried away.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like Gandalf.
I guess so. I could say that.
Gandalf got carried away. I forgot about that bit. But that's kind of by the way. But that's apropos of nothing.
There is going to be a couple of Lord of the Rings references in this, but I make sure to change a few things.
Nothing from Borman's script, though.
Only a complete imbecile would rip off anything from Borman's script deliberately.
Nah, they're brilliant.
That's just your opinion.
Try screaming.
Where's Martin Luther when you need him?
You normally say that with so much more passion, Balerion.
Well, I mean, there's no reason to get worked up.
It's not.
No, don't do that. You already did that more than enough times in one go. Cut it out. Just time to grow up already.
I just said it doesn't involve sausages. I didn't say anything else.
I'm doing a preemptive strike. I'm doing a preemptive strike. With you, it has to do a preemptive strike.
You have major feelings that you're actually seriously made uncomfortable, so I'm not going to do it.
Done. Question. Your books are physical, right? Or are they specifically virtual?
They're both.
Okay. Apologies. My library has decided to say fuck you. We're not purchasing your book.
Really?
Don't know why. Yeah, they've done that from like the past 3 suggestions I've made. I don't know why. They did one, and then they just seem to be declining every other suggestion. Well, they've done 2. They did Chad's book. They did this stupid Annie Finch's book about poetry, and then they've just been declining every other one. I don't know why.
Maybe it's because I'm not terribly popular or something, or they don't like my covers.
Chad also wasn't.
So are they?
Small actor.
Yeah, I mean, they must have, presumably in principle they have some kind of criteria whereby they decide what's suitable for their library and what isn't. And I have no idea, of course, what they would be. Is this a public library?
Yes.
Yeah, and they presumably have a popular selection.
Well, again, I requested Chad's book and they got it.
Yeah. Is Chad books more or less similar? Is that also a fantasy novel thing?
Yes.
Yep.
The library is very good when it comes to its selection. It normally does say yes when I request shit. I've only recently just started to get some difficulties with them where they're just saying no, and I don't know why. Because some of the suggestions, like, you've made similar ones before. I don't know why you have a problem with this one. And they don't tell you why. They tell you to look at their guidelines. But it's like, I've seen your guidelines. You've done similar things. I don't know why you have a problem with this.
Did you ask them why?
No. How the hell do I ask them?
Well, who is in charge of making one of the librarians must be in charge of making these decisions.
It's a board. You want me to go contact the board and be like, hey, why'd you reject my suggestion? I highly doubt it's going to make them more likely to say yes in the future.
I mean, is there someone who can email and say, I would suggest blah, 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 blah. Can you please tell me why this does not meet your criteria?
I don't know.
I mean, you could do it or not do it. It doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter to me, but...
Just weird.
Yeah. Who knows?
I made them get a fucking comic book once. And they said yes.
Lol. It's hilarious.
Yep. I've made them get a lot of weird shit.
Undoubtedly.
The fact that you don't have any doubts concerns me, and yet I'm also not surprised.
Yeah, well, you know.
Well, I guess maybe your brain was broken by my Pinterest board, so I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. So I should be more surprised, I suppose, but we're both equal. We're both a pair of degenerates. It's just that your brain was broken about how anal my organization / extensive cataloging is.
I was very unprepared.
But do people not normally have that anal in terms of Pinterest organization?
Not unless they're Shad.
This is a fighting moment in the story.
You and Shad have that similarity. I can tell you that right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's that from? We look at the rules, text wall. We are never going to tell you. Oh yeah, that's funny. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, because the guidelines have to be interpreted. So, why you're interpreting it in this particular way versus that particular way. Maybe they just had met their quota of whatever that particular genre was, and they didn't have any more space in their collection for that genre. I don't know.
I do wish they would just tell you in the thing, like, hey, this is the reason.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Because then at least you know whether or not your purchase is just something they don't want to do, or there's just some other reason that's just kind of like the bullshit they have to deal with. But you don't know because this don't specify. They say look at the guidelines as if that's useful. Mate, you have several guidelines. How am I supposed to know which one did not make the count?
So none of Bright Lord Dunn's books have been approved by them. Is that it?
I've only tried one.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say maybe the reason is that one of the librarians is actually Replica in a Clever Disguise.
I don't think Replica has the intelligence to walk in a library.
Balder.
I'm re-listening to his Revenge of the Sith debate with us, and it is a trip, to say the least, of the amount of sophistry and gaslighting going on. He's terrible at articulating his points, but anyway.
At least you'll be able to look forward to when Tarek just like puts him on pause for a moment and then weighs into him.
That's just that's the Replica cut. I'm talking about the Revenge of the Sith debate.
He does it there too, where he's like he calls him an idiot. I remember that very specifically. Both times Tarek got really pissed and then went on a rant.
And it was amazing to watch.
Yep. Tarek, do more of that. I know Replica isn't here, but just do more of that.
It would be singularly amusing, I must admit.
Does Replica still like Tarek?
I don't know. I think like Tarek has given him so little attention that he doesn't really notice. At least I think. Since Tarek didn't destroy him, like at least like hasn't like challenged his certain senpais of his as much as say I have.
You're in active conflict with him. He still is looking at Tarek like he's fucking Achilles and he's fucking Patroclus or however it's pronounced.
Patroclus is way too cool for Replica.
Oh, I know.
Does stuff.
It's not a mutual relationship in any way.
Yeah, I don't remember Tarek being involved in the later Flame Wars, but I wasn't paying all that much attention.
Yeah. Well, alrighty. Well, I think we should end this. Any final thoughts before we finish?
Die screaming.
I'll be back next week, boys.
Alrighty. Well, the only thing we have left now is we are going to be working on. We're going to be doing Kenobi tomorrow. Our final Kenobi review. And that's going to conclude Star Wars for a very, very long time. I am seriously considering doing a writing thing just about the like the Jon Snow prequel, what they possibly could do with that, the options they have, since they're extreme. Since they can either go extremely limited or crazy.
Okay, yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, I think it'll be a recording, since it seems like it works better, since at least like the algorithm favors non-live content.
So you'll bring up a bunch of us together and we'll have that conversation, but there won't be anyone in the chat, and then we'll chat about it, and then you'll record it afterwards.
Yeah.
You can also premiere things.
I know, but I don't see the point.
Sorry?
Just to get out something at a certain time.
I know that's what I do. I schedule them. Like I schedule them to instantly release. But like premiering is basically live streaming a pre-recorded video.
Yeah, so I have no idea what the algorithm does with that.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea either. I just upload stuff. But I think since the Rings of Power is going to come out, I think we'll do the Superfans review. I am seriously I have we're a bit late to the party on that one, but I am extremely excited to show that to you guys because it is indicative of what exactly their problems are in terms of this is what they think the Tolkien is, and this is their bias.
Maybe you should make me watch The Lord of the Rings before then.
You don't need to. This has nothing to do with Lord of the Rings. This is a cynical cash grab from Amazon, and they're using the usual like shields because they are cynically treating black minorities as criticism shields.
But you know what the answer to that is? That they're also that lots. It's not that uncommon anymore to have people of color. And it was until recently, maybe, but it's not that uncommon anymore. And we got House of the Dragon as a counter example.
Oh, so I'm not really talking about like inclusion of minorities. I'm saying that they have actively said that if you don't like the show, you're racist already.
So yeah, I mean,
they always do because it gets that particular crowd to fight it for them. It's like there are a bunch of mercenaries who you basically pay by saying that kind of stupid bullshit because then they will just fight you for free.
Yeah, of course, unfortunately it does seem to be true of some people.
Yes, this is an unfortunate fact that some people are focusing on this far too much as a talking point.
Yeah, so when we actually watch the thing, we'll be reviewing it on more aesthetic criteria.
Yeah, since like my opinion on diversity is that it's irrelevant. It doesn't increase or decrease the quality of something by itself.
Whereas on the one hand, I do think it's good, but on the other hand, it's not something that's special to the Rings of Power. So they can't make it. That doesn't. Something can still be bad and have diversity. It's not bad because of the diversity, but it can still be bad for other reasons.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So that's where I'm going with that.
Oh yeah, like diversity, I don't really care. Like, I hate that they have made that this kind of marketing where they have where because of what they have done, they have very much skewed the narrative in the position of weaponizing supposed claims of racism in order to deflect from criticism. And that all that serves to is increase racial tension. It doesn't alleviate it.
The most piquant example of that being Peter Dinklage.
Yeah. I think, or like, especially kind of it's strange because like a person like Morgan Freeman says, the more you talk about racism, the more power you give it. And the way to beat racism is to stop talking about it.
And then Morgan Freeman is called racist.
Even though he's a black man.
Yep. It'll cause its own war where half will call him racist and half say he's black, he can't be racist.
And I say neither, but I don't know if that argument is sound or not, but we don't have time to get into all that here.
Yeah,
Either argument sound.
I think that, like, if a white man were saying that, it would not hold as much value. But since it is a man, an elderly African American man who has been in the business for years and has lived through quite a bit of
He is God.
history. Well, that too. I would say that is a fairly mature and well-reasoned argument on Morgan Freeman's part.
Yeah.
Because Morgan Freeman ain't a whiny little bitch.
Oh, he was born in 1935.
Damn, he was around for World War II.
He's my parents' age.
Yeah, so he's lived through the civil rights. He lived through the civil rights era. So, if anybody has the right to comment on this, I would say that Morgan Freeman has the right to comment on this.
Do you think he will live to 100? Do you think it's possible? He doesn't age, so...
It is possible. Well, I think we'll call it good there. I have Maggie May Fish to look at, and thankfully it's a short 10-minute video, but it's a weird makeup one, so it's going to be bad.
Okay.
Makeup?
Oh yeah, she does a makeup tutorial, and she does it terribly. Even like the trans woman and the girlfriend of one of the guys on the show keeps saying, why is she applying her makeup like a clown? So let's
that would be fun, I'm sure.
Oh, it will, mostly because we're taking the piss out of her. All right, see you later.
Have a riot.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!